Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information that's useful for your everyday life, whether you are in Korea or you have an interest in Korea and you're watching us somewhere else around the world. Today we're going to focus on culture, and namely something to do with language. So to explain what's going on in South Korea right now, I'm happy to say, for the second time, with me at least, Won Jung-hwan is in the studio for us. So Jung-hwan, what do you have for us today?
So Mark, before I go any further, how good is your Korean, and where and how do you practice it?
Right, well, you're putting me on the spot here, Jung-hwan. But 요즘 공부 시간 별로 없어서 실력이 많이 떨어졌어요. How about that? Does that sound okay?
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing.
No,
Mark.
but to answer your question, I started studying in class at a university for about 2 years. I did every weekday, 4 hours a day, and then I'd go home and do homework until I reached a certain point and my schedule got too busy, and then I just had to stop. But I still speak Korean at home with my wife. Yeah. So it's nice to keep up, but definitely I felt like my Korean skills have gone down a bit.
Well, in fact, it is not so common yet, but when I go around Seoul, I sometimes notice there are some foreign visitors who actually speak Korean quite fluently.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I could probably say
better
more.
Than me.
Because probably say more and more Koreans are actually getting used to the Korean language itself, thanks to the growing popularity of Korean culture and the television drama series that goes abroad. But I always wondered, like how you did it and stuff, I always wondered how those foreigners actually study the language. Indeed, to get a closer look into how foreigners do it, I went to the Korean Language Education Center at Seoul National University. The institute was established in 1969 and aims to teach Korean language and culture to international students, intending to learn Korean language as a foreign language or their second language. Over 28,000 students from more than 90 countries have graduated from the programs laid out by the institute, and the program invites some 500 students every semester from overseas. I had a chance to peek in on one of the classes. I first asked him, what's the most difficult thing about learning Korean?
영어하고 한국어 아주 큰 차이가 있어서 좀 헷갈려요. 그 문장을 쓸 때 좀 반대하는 방법이 있어서 좀 계속 배우면 잘 할 수 있을 것 같아요.
사실 말하기 시험 볼 때 괜찮은데 한국 사람과 말할 때 그렇게 쉽지 않아요.
But despite their difficulties in learning Korean, more non-Koreans are studying Korean academically nowadays. As for real classrooms, some 57,000 students are studying at over 170 branches of the government-backed King Sejong Institute, from Nairobi to Minsk and from London to Tokyo. Further evidence of the language's popularity can be found in the number of takers of the test for proficiency in Korean. A total of some 260,000 people took the topic in 2018, up 77% from 2010. In fact, the number of such students has been growing sharply over the past few years, to the point where some are saying the number of foreign Korean literature and language students is similar to locals. Experts explain the phenomenon has resulted from the increasing number of foreign nationals who want to become Korean language specialists. And of course, this is thanks to the extra attention South Korea and its culture have been receiving from abroad.
Well, it's great to see that so many people out there are interested in learning Korean. It is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn if you aren't a native speaker, and I still feel embarrassed for speaking Korean on Arirang News. I don't think
pretty good.
Well, I've never done it before, Jung-hwan. 아직도 창피해요, I should say. So I suppose looking at that, are these classes really worth it? Are you going to get your money's worth, or are there other options out there where you can perhaps go about being just as good, if not better, without sitting in class for hours on end?
Well, maybe, but talking with those native-like foreigners that I recently encountered, They said studying at Language Center isn't always the answer for making it perfect. Indeed, the group of students I met told me that academic way of approaching didn't really help them to reach the level they are at the moment. I followed them around to see how they study the language, and I noticed they enjoyed using Korean. In fact, the language was part of them at their daily lives. For instance, when they order something at a restaurant or just watching their favorite K-drama shows.
제 생각엔 혼자 이렇게 새로운 어휘와 뭐 새로운 문법을 혼자 공부하는 대신에 밖에서 예를 들어 뭐 한국어를 이렇게 원어민스럽게 한국 친구랑 공부하는 것이 더 좋을 것 같아요. 왜냐하면 이렇게 한국어로 말할 때 제가 원어민이 아니라서 아마 실수를 쉽게 할 수 있거든요. 그래서 이렇게 한국인이랑 이렇게 한국 친구랑 한국어를 이렇게 재미있게 공부하면 내가 아마 갑자기 뭐 실수를 하면 그 친구가 한국어를 어떻게 이렇게 맞게 말해야 하는지 그리고 어떤 단어를 뭐 어떤 상황에서 쓰면 더 좋을 건지 설명할 수 있어서.
They all told me how embarrassed they were back in the days when they made mistakes speaking to locals. But each time they made mistakes, they took it as a learning process. And on top of that, even when they were watching their favorite shows in their leisure time, it was interesting to see how they tried really hard to get used to the language.
드라마 너무 많이 좋아해요. 네, 그래서 거의 보고 그 보통 따라하는 것보다는 저는 속으로 듣고 만약에 이해 못한 부분이 있다면 다시 뒤로 가서 다시 보기. 그러니까 드라마 한 편의 1회를 제가 한 보통 2번에서 3번 정도 보는 것 같아요. 네, 다 완전히 이해할 때까지요.
So Mark, in the end of the day, I personally learned from those group of people that if you actually want to be extra good in Korean, first, you shouldn't be scared of making any mistakes.
Yeah.
And second, most importantly, you have to put a lot of efforts, proving once again that there's no shortcuts in our lives.
Yeah, well, very wise words there, Jung-hwan, and very impressive, some of those students, the way they could speak Korean. I was watching the Russian student you spoke to, just the speed and fluidity at which she was speaking Korean. She must have been at a very advanced
High level. The highest level, actually.
The highest level, actually. Maybe that's why I should have studied more. Okay, Jung-hwan, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, we are going to take a look at some of the cultural events that are taking place in the country.